Hi,
doing?
Nas. Good. How are you? Long
Yeah, very
time.
well, very well, very well. Yeah, yeah, long time. Indeed, indeed.
Thank you so much for
So we're
joining me.
in absolute pleasure. We're so in Dubai we have issues with connectivity on Insta Live, but I've got a VPN on, so hopefully that'll sort it out.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much to everybody who's joining. This is fantastic. I'm so excited today to be interviewing Dr. Nas Al-Jafari. He is the medical director of the DNA Health Center in Dubai, and he is a functional medicine practitioner. And we're going to be able to, I'm going to ask him some questions, but you're going to be able to ask questions of him today. So he is a wealth of knowledge, and we actually met when I was at university in the UK. So I know that he is very smart. So let's get to it. If you want to add anything, and everybody should probably know who I am. I'm Debbie Sugarbaker, and I do interviews of individuals from around the world who I believe are really adding value and to help raise consciousness around healing, around health, around spirituality, around wellness, and a variety of topics. So if you haven't been to my page before, check it out. You can see lots of interviews that I've done with a whole gamut of people and experts. So check it out at Debbie Sugarbeat, and we'll just get started. Did you want to introduce yourself anymore, Nas?
Yeah, no, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, no, you're quite right. We probably met in the UK, but it's probably now, gosh, 12 years ago. I don't even know. I've lost count. Time flies by. But yeah, no, I've been in Dubai for the last 6 years, or the UAE for the last 6 years, where I've been practicing, I guess, more functionally, you could say, because, rather than it being a specialty, I think it's more a philosophy and approach to healthcare, which I'm sure we'll go into. And I think, given what's going on now in the world, it's something that finally seems to have caught a lot more people's attention with respect to just keeping well and not just kind of looking at themselves being sick in a traditional sense, but looking to optimize their health. So very excited to be on today.
Fantastic. Well, I'm excited that you're here. And I thought we would just start with some questions, some basic questions. A lot of people might not even know what functional medicine is. Can you give us a little, what is it? So you're a traditional medical doctor, you have your degree. You can just explain a little bit. It would be helpful.
Yeah, so I trained traditionally in the allopathic sort of system. Did my medical school, qualified eventually as a general practitioner in the UK. We're called family medicine consultants in the US and in the UAE. And I had a personal interest in health just because I was into sports and weightlifting and looking to optimize my performance. So naturally started to look into sort of nutrition and training and sleep and things like stress and how they influence health. Because ultimately during my time in medical school and postgrad training, it was nothing that was really covered, probably no more than an hour or two in lectures that we probably never attended.
So crazy.
I know, living the life. And then, you look at the way we treat, or the traditional system treats probably the most common conditions, so cardiovascular disease, the way we assess lipid profiles, the approach to obesity, the calories in, calories out approach. You look at the way diabetes is treated, where everyone's looking at controlling the sugars, but actually often driving the root cause, which is insulin resistance. The way we approach dementia and Alzheimer's, where we're developing drugs that are invariably a failure, which are trying to tackle plaques in the brain, which, as I said, are very unsuccessful. And it's because the system hasn't caught on to the fact that all these conditions are caused by lifestyle. Yes, you can have a certain genetic predisposition. Your genes only really load the gun, but your environment pulls the trigger, which is a common phrase that we use. I think at the same time, the health system has become very sub-specialized, which is great. For example, if you want to go and have someone do a particular surgery, you want someone who's done that operation 200 times already that year that it's, you know, they're doing
Exactly.
it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But at the same time, people have missed the point that our systems are all integrated. And I think that's really, I think describes functional medicine. It's more of an integrative way of looking at health and asking the question, why has a disease occurred, and assessing those factors, which invariably come back to lifestyle. And within lifestyle, we're kind of dividing it up into nutrition, exercise or lack of exercise, stress, sleep.
Stress, water, hydration, right? All this kind of
Exactly,
things.
exactly. So I think that's really it in a nutshell.
In a nutshell. So, you know, there's really a lot there, and like you said, it's really come into the light with the coronavirus, because now everybody's much more interested in immunity and what we're eating and how they're sleeping, and just with the time probably in quarantine or being away from the usual stress, you know, people are really looking or been forced to look at how they take care of themselves. So one of the things that's been really, you know, out there is intermittent fasting and the benefits of intermittent fasting. And I would just wondered, you know, since you are a professional, you know, there's also a lot of stuff out there that you're not quite sure, you know, what the source is and if it's trustworthy. And of course, I believe you always, when it comes to health, you need to always like check and research and, you know, make your own decisions, but that's just me. But since we do have you and you're a, you know, certified medical practitioner and you work with this, what can you tell us about intermittent fasting?
You know, we call it intermittent fasting as if it's kind of, you know, we give it a label as if it's a new thing, but it's effectively just how our ancestors used to live. And when I talk about our ancestors, we're not really having to go that far back. I mean, you know, if you look a couple of generations ago, we were consuming our food probably within an 8 to 10 hour window, no more. The problem with modern day lifestyle is we're waking up earlier for work or to get the kids to school, and invariably we're in a rush. So you're grabbing your highly processed food, which didn't exist 100 years ago. And then people are getting back later from work, and, you know, dinner becomes probably the only family social occasion. So then if you assess the time period that people are eating over, it can very easily be from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. plus. Quite simply, our bodies just weren't designed to be in a fed state for such a prolonged period of time. We're meant to have more downtime where we're in a fasted state, and it really is about balance between being in a fed and fasted state. I think to compound issues, you know, 50, 60 years ago, they created snacks. And this was, you know, the cynical part of me says that this is just a reason for the food and drinks industry to sell more foods. Then also this notion came out to be healthier, to stabilize your blood sugars, you need to eat small amounts regularly. Again, along with many of these supposed guidelines that come out, there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever. And it's quite to the contrary. It's probably the last thing that you want to be doing. And you know, put it this way, what does a farmer want to do, or what does a farmer do with his animals when he's trying to fatten them for market? He lets them graze on grains. This is effectively what our modern day world is doing. But on the fasting point, the thing I want to just leave you on there is that, you know, what is probably the only thing that every single major religion agrees on? It's that at some point in the year they practice fasting, and that's not just because of the spiritual effects, and they realize that there was health effects. So it's something that we all need to.
That's true. I've done fastings, and I always feel great after. At the end of the day, it's hard in the day, and then I'm like, even from water too. But then at the end, you always feel like this energy. Of course, there's the spiritual reason for that, as you said, but. Completely. And actually, you know, what's interesting is probably, you know, when these people were entering potentially ketosis from fasting, you know, there is a difference in focus, in energy, in calmness. And probably this was the connection to God that people were experiencing. Right. So basically, you would recommend intermittent fasting. This is something that you recommend consciously, or just that if you regulate your eating, and you eat on a normal schedule, then you are kind of intermittent fasting. Besides breakfast, maybe you need a little more time in the morning. I mean, personally, that's how
Well,
I
yes.
eat.
Yeah, I think we have to kind of divide intermittent fasting up. So there's this intermittent fasting that you would do in a single day, and that's what I would call daily time restricted eating. So yes, just being sensible about the time period over that you're eating your food, which arbitrarily, 8 to 10 hours. You could do shorter eating windows. Now, yeah, I think it's something that should be practiced by everyone. Listen, there are going to be subgroups of people. So, children, people who are breastfeeding, people who are pregnant, people with eating disorders. Fine. I mean, you're going to have a slightly different approach, but for everybody else, which is 99% of the population.
That's important to say, because some people do have or have had in the past, different eating disorders or different issues like that. Of course, you want to take those things into account.
Well,
but as you said, it's a small portion of the population.
Small group of people, but then also it comes back to just eating intuitively. So, 200 years ago, people weren't thinking to themselves, "Oh, I'm pregnant. I need to eat 5 times, and I need to." It was just they ate food when they felt they needed to eat. Their body was telling them when they needed to eat, and I think that's another issue. We've lost kind of hunger signals. Our hormones are imbalanced, so that confuses the issue. I think then you need to move on to.
Then that goes into stress, right? So then that goes into stress and regulating the central nervous system, so that I actually can tell, am I hungry, or am I just stressed, or am I in a relaxed state, or am I just going? And so I just want to eat, right?
Completely. And that comes to, weight and weight management being a hormonal imbalance rather than it being a calorie issue. And we're getting a lot of people now coming in for weight issues. They say that nothing's happened with their lifestyle in the last year other than, lockdown or whatever, working from home. But actually what they've not realized or accounted for is the stress and sleep disruption. When I talk about sleep disruption, I don't just mean reduced hours of sleep. I mean, changes in sleep time. People haven't been as accountable for getting up as early. We've lost that circadian rhythm, which all our hormones are tied to, has also played a havoc with
so you would say that this is all related with COVID. By the way, hi, Nina. Thank you for joining. Good morning. So you would say that, like, it has to do, you're talking about, like, with Corona, right? All the changes that have happened since then with this regulating sleep.
Exactly. Yes. Completely. I think, putting, standardizing for kind of people eating the same food, training the same amount, because everyone talks about food and exercise because it's the kind of low hanging fruit. It's the easy thing to address, but actually standardizing for that. People's stress often has changed for obvious reasons, and sleep has been disrupted. And one thing I've realized in my practice is that sleep and stress underpin everything else. So if you're a well-slept person who is calm and stress resilient, then you have a lot more flexibility with what you can eat and your nutrition and lack of exercise. Whereas it doesn't work the other way around. You can have a great nutrition.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, in that kind of thing, if you're like a well-adjusted, resilient, kind of your energy's in that place, it has to do with other things, right? That you're able to kind of, that goes into a whole nother topic. That's why, like, functional medicine is so holistic, because then it's like, well, how do you, what are the things that work for that individual to be in that state? I mean, that's like a whole nother, that's kind of another area that I'm interested in, like personal growth and wellness and mindset, and it's all connected. But I didn't mean
completely. No, completely. It's all right. No, you're getting excited. I completely agree. And stress and sleep are often intertwined. And then, then with that, people, when they become sleep deprived, they're then turning to, things like caffeine. You're less insulin sensitive, so you have higher insulin levels. You're gonna get fluctuations in your sugars. So you're gonna, as you said, crave foods. You're gonna have less energy to exercise. So it's a bit of it becomes a slippery slope. And what's interesting is, talking about stress and sleep was probably considered quite wimpy even 10 years ago. But now it's something that people are embracing a lot more. They do find it a lot more difficult. And even myself find it very difficult to integrate into our day-to-day lives, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes. But it's extremely impactful, as you know yourself.
Right. Thank you so much for all the hearts. Everyone is watching. So I wanted to kind of ask you another question, just go into a slightly different topic, and that is, if, a lot of people are talking about immunity with, everything that's going on. So what would be your top three, if I could ask you your top three tips for immunity in this time, or for building immunity from your perspective?
Yeah, it's interesting because everyone's jumping to the supplements, and a lot of the supplement stores have sold out of the usual kind of vitamin C and zinc and so forth.
Right.
And we're always looking for a quick fix, but I honestly don't think there's anything more powerful, and this may sound boring to some, there's nothing more powerful than sleep. So getting, you're approximately 8 hours of good quality sleep, because even just one night's disrupted sleep, and when we talk about disrupted sleep, we're not talking 2-3 hours, we're talking, 6 hours sleep, which is actually probably what most people are getting. You have a reduction in your, what's called your natural killer cells, which, fundamental aspect of the immune response. And then at the same time, the quality of your nutrition. So a lot of people now, unfortunately, just because of what's available to us and what's mass produced, are eating overly refined, kind of highly processed foods that lacks kind of nutrient density. So you are what you eat, and so it's about kind of improving the quality and nutrient density of the food you're eating. And I think we could talk for days about nutrition, but I think just it's about eating as close to nature as possible, and improving diversity.
Exactly. Okay, so eating and sleep, and the third one.
The third one.
Your third tip.
Yeah, I mean, again, so actually, interestingly, and this is ironic, social connection improves and touch and improves immunity, and that's an issue because of the lack of closeness and social distancing that people have been doing. I wouldn't say that that's necessarily in the top three, but I think it's just an important point. Yeah,
that's a really important point. And smiling and laughing and like having a good time, it's so important for our immunity. We got some claps for that. There's some agreement. So something that I saw you posted was about the effect of thoughts and sounds and their potential for healing on the cells. So I wanted to ask you to explain I personally, in my kind of exploration of things and doing, sound therapy and stuff like that for myself, have found it to be really powerful. So I just was wondering from your kind of scientific or medical perspective, what is it that you were talking about, and how do they really can it affect the cell structure or?
Yeah, and it's amazing, when you talk about this sort of stuff now, and the millions of billions of people over the centuries who have practiced these principles, and it still gets dismissed as woo-woo and witchcraft. I think the problem, again, in the last century is we've been indoctrinated with a particular way of looking at health. And, when anyone presents something alternative, it's our natural defense mechanism. If we don't understand it, we stay in our comfort zone and prefer simpler explanations which sound more logical to us. My personal view of this is, we understand health on a biological level. It was how it was kind of really taught to us. But I think what most people haven't grasped is that a lot of this and a lot of our health actually is happening on a subatomic level, and is actually things that even, there's people cleverer than me that can explain it a lot better, but we have to understand it more in a physics sense. And, but I don't, that being said, I don't think that anyone would deny that we are charged. We have electricity. People will relate to that through the fact that they know that the heart beats, and that depends on electrical current. Well, that electrical current is also fundamental to other mechanisms in the body. I mean, the way the actual cell itself works, the mitochondria, membrane potentials, the way blood flows around the body. And actually part of that is also the fact that beyond the three phases of water, we have a fourth phase, which is structured water, which allows us to hold this electrical charge. And this has been proven, and probably one of the most famous people behind this work is a gentleman called Dr. Gerard Poller. There was also an interesting guy who did a number of studies, I think in the 70s and 80s, Robert Becker, who actually did studies where he applied electricity and energy to healing orthopedic injuries and demonstrated that there was an improvement in healing. I guess what I'm getting at is that it's something that most people don't understand, so it gets dismissed and often gets labeled as a kind of placebo, because we just don't have any other way of describing it. But also, placebo just is the label given to kind of just when people talk about the power of the mind over the body as if it's a kind of negative thing. Well, no, and yes, it is a rational explanation of what's been going on. Right. It just proves to us how important our thoughts are, and yes, our thoughts and sounds influence that frequency of electricity in our body. At the same time, because we've become removed from the frequencies that we used to get from the phytoelectric current from the sun and from the earth, we've lost that, and we're now exposed to a lot of dirty electricity from Wi-Fi, all the sort of electronics and things that are around us today. Again, well, and it's something that people will laugh about, but mechanistically, if you break all these individual components down, it's in the science. It's just no one has done large-scale studies, so it doesn't get accepted by the mainstream.
Right. Well, eventually, hopefully it will. And also, it works for people. So there we go. The proof is
exactly. I mean, exactly. I mean, you can't really suppress that. I mean, what are you saying? Are you saying that all these millions and billions of people are lying?
Right.
So no, I don't know whether it will ever become fully accepted, because again, the cynical part of me says that, well, no one's going to make money out of a lot of this stuff. It's the same with fasting. It's the same with sleep. There's no commercial, or very few commercial industries behind sleeps, relatively less stress control. So it's never going to take off.
I see what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense. So before we open it up to questions, there was one more. So we talked about vitamins, supplements. No, I think we can actually, if anybody has any questions, you can feel free to ask. Nas, does anybody have any questions?
Just while we're waiting for questions to come in, I just one point I wanted to make when we drifted off from the fasting part. We didn't talk about longer periods of fasting. So this is actually the more therapeutic.
That's a little scary.
The more therapeutic types of fasting are the water fasting that's done over a longer period of time, and this is the one again which seems to flick what we call epigenetic switches, so certain genes on and off, which are more conducive with longevity and repair. And this is the type of fasting which very few people do. So when people talk about I'm doing intermittent fasting, they're talking about doing daily time restricted eating, but they're not actually talking about the longer, more therapeutic types of fasting.
So do you work with people who have, more serious health conditions and work with them through fasting and diet and all that kind of stuff? In conjunction with their other treatments?
Yes, so we apply it from everything from weight loss control to autoimmunity to diabetes reversal. It's far-reaching. I mean, I've literally had people's autoimmunity go into remission and chronic skin conditions go into remission just from one long water fast.
Wow, that's incredible. So someone wrote, I have a very bad habit of starting the day with coffee. How bad is that, and how to change it?
Yeah, I need to add at this point that this is ginger tea, not coffee. So so how do you change that habit? Well, I think you have to start by asking yourself the question, why are you having the coffee? So often, and I know this is a sweeping generalization, but often most people are having coffee for the caffeine effects to stay awake because they're sleep deprived. I think that does naturally then evolve to, good coffee is very nice.
Exactly.
But then you have to differentiate between, what is a dependency and what is kind of just you like it and you can take it or leave it. I think the important thing there is if you are developing a dependency, then, as I said, it comes back to sleep. So it's about addressing your sleep, first of all. But caffeine is something that really needs to be cycled as well. It's not something that you want to become dependent on, which most of us in modern day life are.
Right. And by cycle, do you mean like sometimes maybe you let it go altogether, but you can come back to it a little bit, or is that what you mean?
Exactly. Yeah. I think, just having a week or two off coffee, like anything, I think, there's an assumption that, often when you're taking supplements and hormones and things like it, you do cause biochemical shifts in the body, and it is good to just get back to your kind of natural state.
Equilibrium.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if there's any other questions. Someone said that Mina will start with tea. Tea. I was wondering, in your experiences, if you think integrated functional medicine is more accepted in Dubai or Europe versus the States. Thank you, Vivian, for your question.
Very good question. So it's interesting. Traditionally in Dubai and the UAE, no, but you do have a subset of the population who I would say is aligned with the American approach. I don't mean the American approach to general health. That's the complete opposite. But awareness of integrative and functional medicine, I'll say that. But it's still a very small percentage of the population, but it's growing. Europe is very divided, and I think it depends on the health system that you work with. You'll find that the Germans, and with them the Austrians and sometimes the Swiss, have been doing a lot of this stuff, maybe in slightly different forms, for decades. Whether you count Russia as Europe or not, the Russians have got certain aspects of it that they're very progressive in and have been doing again for decades. But then when you go to systems that have more of a public system, I mean, certainly now I'm thinking obviously from my own experience, the UK, it's a bit of a kind of foreign matter. But I think there's also forces that are preventing it from getting a grounding, and that comes down to the General Medical Council and regulators, and they have very much a traditional mindset. And listen, I get it, because they want to stop wayward practitioners. They don't want it kind of turning into the Wild West. Right. So it is a little bit of a fine balance.
There's a line.
No.
Continue.
Yeah. So there's I think it's highly variable, but the US by far has pockets that have been doing it, or certainly been practicing what we know as functional medicine for a long time. But actually, that being said, there's certain things, even because of the regulation in the US, that people in Europe are doing that a lot of the guys I know functional practice in the US would love to be practicing.
Right. Wow. So are some of the concepts that you practice, that you put into practice, which it sounds like it is, because it's very much has to do with lifestyle and, like you said, stress, sleep, nutrition, all these kinds of things. So do you find that, some of them, we're talking about this across the world, I can imagine that in some cultures, there are things that have maybe been around for centuries, that they say like, oh, when you get sick, you drink an onion in water with lemon, and different things like that, different like remedies that are more natural, that have been around for thousands of years and just kind of like passed through families. Like, have you noticed those types of things or anything like that that's like working?
Yeah, exactly. And we use the term functional medicine. It's just a rebranding.
Right.
You can integrative medicine, Ayurvedic practice, Chinese medicine. There's a lot of overlap, but ultimately they are based on, yes, a lot of ancient practices, you know, combined with the sort of modern wisdom in the sense that we understand the science.
Right.
So, but it is going back to a lot of these practices. And listen, in my practice, yeah, okay, there's a lot of fancy testing, but the management plans are very simple, and it is about lifestyle, or certainly it should be. Lifestyle is the cornerstone. Now, we are having to use modern day hacks because of the false environment that we're living in. So, you know, we have the ability now to track sleep. We can track stress through heart rate variability and other means. We have ways of continuously tracking people's glucose. And you know, I'm not saying that these things are essential, but we have these adjuncts that are very powerful, if anything, just from a behavioral change perspective, but also to help us because our lives have become so removed from how we evolved to live in. We often need these to assist us because we're constantly, there's that power or force that's dragging us back to live the modern day lifestyle, which we need to, okay, we can't extract ourselves and all live on a mountain with Buddhist monks and drink spring water, but there are certain things that we can integrate in our day-to-day lives to mitigate the effects.
Totally. So one thing that just came to mind was, you know, something that I know that's very popular here is infrared saunas. Do you have that, and do you have any comments on that, or?
Yeah, so it's become very popular, and a lot of this is derived from what I was saying about, you know, nowadays we don't have we have very little exposure to the sun relative
Right.
to what we used to, and it turns out that all the different spectrums of light from the sun have an effect on the body. And what's interesting now, everyone focuses on vitamin D and topping up their vitamin D levels,
Right.
which will have some impact. You know, it's better to be vitamin D sufficient, or I shouldn't say sufficient, optimized, than being low. But I think people are missing the point that light and the different spectrums of light, including infrared, has a profound impact on cellular function, and part of that is the energy and frequencies that we were talking about. And actually, if you look at the biochemical structure of a mitochondria, it's actually very similar to a chloroplast, which is the part of the plant which produces energy from the sun.
Oh, wow.
It just so happens that we have the ability to run around and eat food, so we have a gastrointestinal tract as well. But the different frequencies of light have an effect on various aspects of the mitochondria in the cell, which is the powerhouse of the cell. So, you know, there's all sorts of other nuances with near infrared, but I think I just want to leave you with that sort of simple but powerful point that, you know, we were talking about top 3 things to do to boost the immune system. I think just top things to do to just boost overall health in general is getting out in the sun and in nature. And actually, you know, if we look back to sort of Victorian times, you know, people who were sick in hospitals, they used to wheel out into the sun on the beaches in the salt water.
Right.
So, yeah, we have a lot of these things that are just accessible and free, and yet people are jumping to supplements and medications and missing what is actually probably more impactful. And I'm a firm believer that whatever pharmaceutical drug you have available, there's something in nature that exists that is as powerful, if not more powerful.
Wow. Now I feel like I could just keep asking you questions. So like a fount of knowledge. So about the sun, but you would recommend, like, if you do, for example, I live in LA, so it's very sunny here, and getting out is something that I do every day. But like, you know, obviously with sunblock, but I wondered, you know, what about sunblock? Do you have any?
So yeah, this is a really interesting topic in itself. The issue with sun is, the only issue with sun is burning. So
Right.
there's a difference between healthy sun exposure and unhealthy sun exposure. And actually, you know, there were some studies which, okay, they were observational. So, you know, they show a relationship, but not causality. But people who had lower levels of sun exposure actually had higher incidence of skin cancer. And I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword, the whole sun cream, because yes, it protects you, but it means you're getting less of the UVB light, which is very healthy for us for a lot of the reasons I was just explaining then. But at the same time, it means that people are staying in the sun longer and potentially burning despite, you know, having that protection. So I think, to sum it up, my view of it is, yeah, we need to be going in the sun regularly. It needs to be initially a graded introduction, and yeah, you have to be sensible about it. I always get asked the question about kids. The thing I try and do with my kids is let them run around the sun in a bit for a period of time and get some sun, and then I'll put some sun lotion on, because you're not going to be able to keep them in the shade. So that's my view on it.
Yeah. Wow. Is there any other questions that anyone has? Do you obviously you said to eat as close to nature as possible. And when it comes to like time restricted eating, do you like eat breakfast early, or do you wait until later? And do you like recommend a certain, for example, I'm a vegetarian, but that's just because I figured out that that's what works for me. I wasn't always like that, but since I was like 10 or 11, I was on and off, kind of like realized that I felt tired when I ate meat or whatever. So I know that it's like an individual choice, and you said to eat as close to nature, but can you just give a few points maybe about specific diets, or do you work with blood types, or how do you navigate that or help people navigate it?
Yeah, so I think on that point you mentioned breakfast, because that's very topical. Well, ultimately breakfast just means breaking fast. So that doesn't mean that breakfast has to be at 8, 7 a.m., 8 a.m. It's just your first meal of the day. And so, you know, yes, have breakfast, but respect the time restricted eating that we were talking about. And actually, I just want to add the point on time restricted eating. The idea is not to restrict your caloric consumption. Actually, quite the opposite. We want you to get the energy that you need. And it's about eating intuitively. When it comes to actually the constituents of what you're eating, I mean, we could talk for days, but there's no one diet that suits all. And I think people intuitively know that. The way I practice, above and beyond kind of the whole eating whole real foods, is that you have to track a few parameters. And one is, you know, symptoms and signs, how the individual feels. And I think you just touched on that. And I think also looking at blood parameters, and often sometimes applying certain trackers if we're going really geeky about it. But also at the same time, you know, there's a whole area of nutrigenomics that has evolved, and we are all individually designed for different diets, and some people have certain nutritional requirements. I mean, I know in myself, I mean, I've done all the testing under the sun, and I need higher levels of DHA, EPA, omega-3, because my body doesn't convert it very well. I need higher active B vitamins and folate. I need higher levels of vitamin D. So these are only
and
things
you get that
you
from your food, right? And you try to get those through your food, not through supplements?
Well, so in an ideal world, yes, but the problem now is because the food chain, well, the food handling and the food industry has become so adulterated that often you can't find the nutrient density that you need, even when you're trying to eat well. So often you need to employ supplementation at the same time. As for, you know, keto versus vegan tribal wars, listen, I think you've just got to do what suits you, but the important thing, you have to track how you feel, and you know, if you really, a lot of people who are doing that sort of thing are interested in optimizing their health. Well, if you really want to do it analytically, then you have to look at your genetics and metabolic information to determine whether that's the right thing for you.
Right. And then there's a whole other aspect, which I had a discussion with she was a nutritionist a few weeks ago, which was like the aspect of how you eat, that you're in a calm state, that you, you know, are able to enjoy food also, that it's not just about eating for health or whatever, that you're able to enjoy it. And, you know, even to cheat once in a while, or what do you think about that?
Yeah,
I mean,
so
that's kind of like another aspect, because you're kind of focused on like the health and getting the nutrition, the medical side.
Yeah, no, but I agree with all that. I mean, we have teeth for a reason, and you know, it's to chew, and it's to aid digestion. I mean, I remember being taught that in 13 years old in biology class. But now, yeah, we don't take our time. We don't, you know, many of us don't sit at a table and enjoy our food, and that is important for the gastrointestinal tract and digestion. And along with, you know, weight issues and hormonal imbalances comes gut health issues, and particularly functional gut issues, which you know, often people get labeled with irritable bowel or IBS, which isn't really a diagnosis. It's just a description of someone's symptoms, saying that they have pain, bloating, or change in the bowels on most days of the month. But actually, you know, what we've realized is that a lot of it, the root cause is an issue with the movement of the gut, which is neurological, and also an imbalance in the gut bacteria, which we have modern day testing now that helps us sort of diagnose these issues. But a huge impact or influencer of that is mental state. So we do a lot of work with people who have IBS, and the ones who aren't successful in their treatment, or the ones who relapse later down the line, it's not because of the nutrition aspect, it's because of the mind. And they still have the same stresses or issues that they had before, which often is difficult to change.
Right. Wow. Dr. Susanna Barros, nature is irreplaceable. Yes, 100%. So, well, thank you so much for joining me today. I can connecting with you, and thank you.
Pleasure, an absolute pleasure, and thanks for having me on. And we can always do a part two at some point in the
yeah,
future.
that would be fantastic. It's so crazy to reconnect. You know, to see where when you knew someone at a certain point in your life. I'm just saying this just generally to people. When you knew someone at a certain point in your life, and then, you know, X number of years passes. For us, I think it was like 13 years to reconnect and to see that we're kind of, you know, into the same. I mean, obviously you're a medical doctor, but interested in kind of like this expansion of changing consciousness and, you know, seeing things in a different way and bringing awareness to health and to well-being and to personal growth. It's really cool.
Well, and I think, you know, it's important that people like ourselves are connecting, and now we're fortunate enough to have the ability to connect across the world to try and push the philosophy and to help sort of educate, because I think people are craving this information. But you said at the start that unfortunately the internet is a little bit of a minefield. So deciphering what is, you know, truth and what is, you know, just kind of woo-woo or whatever you may call it, is difficult. So no, and that's something that we're trying to do locally as well, just getting practitioners to work together. There's a huge demand for it, and yeah, looking forward to connecting again.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Susanna, Mina,
thank you, everyone.
Michael, everyone. Thank you, Mina. Okay, all the best.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great day in Dubai.
Cheers. Cheers, Debbie.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.